Good morning and welcome to the 2020 edition of EFIB, the European Forum for Industrial Biotechnology and Bioeconomy. I'm Agnes Borg, Industrial Biotech Director at EuropaBio, the European Association for Bioindustries. And who would have thought, as we met in 2019 in Brussels last year, that so much would change in a year, and that our intention to bring EFIB to Frankfurt and meet you all in person there was not going to be possible during this time. But we have instead, with the EFIB team, worked to adapt our format to meet fully digitally this year. And we are pleased to say that for this year's conference, we are instead virtually gathered across over 25 countries. And as we kick off the 13th edition of EFIB, we have just yesterday finalized this year's European Biotech Week, which was all about celebrating innovation and biotechnology in these crucial times. Because although 2020 has been a very challenging year, we have also seen successes in the life sciences and biotechnology sector. And indeed, we are in times where the uptake of technological solutions is very important. Also this year, the ambitious aim towards climate neutrality, circular economy, and a more sustainable food system has been set in motion through the objectives of the European Green Deal, which is also an important part of the EU's recovery strategy. And to meet these objectives, a range of solutions will be needed, including those coming from innovative biotechnology. And we agree that a focus should be placed on a greener recovery for Europe, and we welcome that the new industrial strategy refers to key enabling technologies, such as industrial biotechnology, as strategically important for the EU's industrial future. Biotech, as you know, evidence to citizens. Industrial biotech products and processes also come with advantages that are essential to a sustainable and future-proof economy. These benefits are also reflected in economic indicators for the European biotech industry, which, for example, has exports that are about double the imports, and industrial biotechnology has a job multiplier of 4.2, meaning that for every job in the sector, there are 4 jobs created elsewhere in the value chain. And it is of key importance to have a long-term, stable, innovation-enabling and policy and incentive framework in Europe, and to ensure a science-based, proportionate, predictable, and regulatory approach to biotechnology innovation. And with our EFIB forum and this year's overall theme on advancing the green economy with biotechnology innovation, we want to highlight the sector's latest achievements in harnessing the power of innovation to help deliver new solutions while addressing the hurdles that remain. And our new digital format provides 5 days of insights and engagements around 6 core topics, including bioprocesses and technologies, food, feed and nutrition, materials and packaging, finance and investment, etc. And we have really a great lineup to look forward to over this 5 days to come, including representatives from the European Commission, of course, including this morning. We have leading CEOs and entrepreneurs, we have innovation platforms, sustainability nonprofits, and investors. One-to-one partnering is also open for you 24/7 during this whole week, so you can interact via that. You also have the opportunity to interact with innovators from startups and academia through our digital startup forum and the Innovation Campus, which features digital academic poster presentations. We will also be announcing winners at the end of the week, so don't miss that one. This afternoon, we will also have an informal meetup on inclusive bioeconomy. So also with the digital event, there are many opportunities for engagement and networking. And we really hope that with EFIB, we will continue to provide a central meeting place for business and policy and other stakeholders. And we really want to thank you all for being part of that and for being here today. A very big thank you, of course, also to our sponsors and partners, to our advisory board, and indeed, again, to all of you participants. We will now get the conference started by welcoming this morning's first speaker, and she is also our moderator for the opening plenary. That's Mrs. Susanne Pedersen. Susanne is the Assistant Director General and the head of the Investment and Policy Solutions Division at the Global Green Growth Institute. She is responsible for giving technical support and services in green investment and policy, and she also oversees strategic planning and implementation and delivery of various projects and programs in partner countries. Susanne has over 25 years of experience in catalyzing partnerships, technology transfer, innovation, and advisory services in the environmental and climate change area. And we are really delighted that she joins us here today. With Susanne's keynote presentation, we will start with a bit more of a global outlook before moving on to the European perspective in our plenary. And I'm very happy now to hand over the word to Susanne Pedersen. Please.
Thank you very much, Agnes, and hello, everyone. I'm really delighted to be able to speak at this conference. I would like to speak about the necessary transformation of the bioeconomy, share some of the many exciting things going on in emerging economies and developing countries. And thirdly, use the opportunity for us to think about how we can share the European practice. But first, let me introduce GGGI, which is an intergovernmental organization supporting strong, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth in developing countries and emerging markets. It is led by Mr. Ban Ki-moon as head of our council, and countries are our members. We have 38 of them, and we are present with staff embedded in government in 40 countries, and it's a global coverage, as you can see. We also have a lot of resource partners, including the EU and many European agencies. The bioeconomy sector, or the sustainable landscapes area, as we call it, is one of GGGI's key thematic priorities. And the green growth agenda that we try to advance towards 2030 is to develop markets for bio-based products and optimize policy frameworks to ease their market uptake, to cut greenhouse gas emissions, create green and decent jobs, especially for vulnerable groups, and mobilize finance. And why is it so important to transform the bioeconomy in general, but also in particularly in emerging economies and developing countries? Certainly, you can see from this slide that the planetary boundaries do set some sort of limits to what we can do, and we already have transgressed some of those. But also, according to the World Economic Forum's Nature Risk Rising report, more than half of the world's GDP is highly or moderately dependent on nature. And globally, 3 out of 4 jobs are dependent on water, while the agricultural sector employs over 60% of the world's working poor. So for many of GGGI's members, the traditional bioeconomy, agriculture and forestry, that is still the backbone of the economy. And for all these countries, innovation that significantly increases the value addition and sustainability of their agricultural products or uses waste products smartly will be critical to create decent green jobs. It's also important to spot opportunities early and get help in leapfrogging their development rather than risk getting left behind. So to the key areas of green growth within bioeconomy is also an important goal for GGGI. Another issue is that to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement will require the mobilization of finance at a historic scale. Over the next 15 years, it is estimated that the world will need about $90 trillion in climate smart infrastructure, most of it in developing countries. Climate finance plays a vital role, and GGGI works to mobilize finance on behalf of our members. And we work with many financial institutions, the most important being the Green Climate Fund, GCF. GGGI and GCF have formed a partnership drawing on the strengths of both organizations to bolster developing country capacities by supporting climate investments in 26 countries currently. And also, we are both right now taking adaptive measures to developing country to carry out post-COVID recovery plans to build back better and to generate short-term employment and income to restart economies. On this slide, you can see certainly some of the challenges facing these countries. I'm sure you all know deforestation on a big scale driven by production of various things, or you've seen peatland burning leading to massive air pollution all over Southeast Asia, or you're probably aware that the use of fuel wood for cooking creates massive problems as well. Or you could say that there are, of course, opportunities as well. Certainly transferring biomass into renewable energy production, climate smart agriculture, or many other things are possible to work at. However, on the question of whether bioeconomy can be a driver of green growth, I would like to illustrate with some examples the many activities GGGI is doing to help with the development of the bioeconomy. I will not go into details with any of them, but certainly focus on showing some examples of natural climate solutions and also how you can use biomass as a feedstock, or what we refer to as a waste to energy. In terms of high impact, you can say that pursuing natural climate solutions or climate mitigation, it is a key strategy for many of GGGI's member countries such as Colombia, Indonesia, Myanmar, etc., that are working on avoided deforestation, reforestation, peatland restoration, etc. And if you look also at this slide, you could say it's reckoned that every dollar spent on nature restoration has at least $9 in economic benefits. And also innovation and bio-based solutions for the agricultural and food production sector can unlock 4.5 trillion per year in new business opportunities by 2030. I would now like to very briefly show some of the examples that also, they say, demonstrate that we are working in GGGI on a lot of different ecosystems, including mangrove areas in Myanmar, river basins in India, peatlands in Indonesia, tropical forest in Colombia. And as such, we are doing significant work in developing frameworks, policies, innovative financing approaches to facilitate the preservation of natural ecosystems. And also, as you can see, we also have done comprehensive work in a number of countries, such as in the Amazon Vision project in Colombia, or we've done in Myanmar rehabilitation of degraded mangrove systems that has the ability to sequester carbon while providing protection against storm surges, tsunamis, provide livelihood for local people, maintain biodiversity. And in Indonesia, I showed before the two slides that do only little justice to what we do in Indonesia on nature-based solutions with more than 70 people. So I think, and altogether, we are covering a breadth of activities, including also now an example on a climate financing facility in Ethiopia. I would now like to focus a bit on waste, or in particular organic waste or biomass, as it is clear that the bio-based industry is both an emerging but also complex sector linking interconnected value chains. At its best, it is able to transform renewable biological feedstocks, such as agricultural byproducts, forestry residues, organic waste, aquatic biomass, into bio-based materials, products, and energy, replacing their fossil fuel-based versions. In a lot of countries, we have chosen to focus on the use of biomass, or waste to energy as we call it, as we find that working on this matter can solve many other environmental and health problems, including making use of organic waste in meaningful ways. And maybe it can even generate a profit and create green new jobs. I will definitely show some examples now, as you can also see that different types of biomass can be used depending on the local circumstances, from sugar in Vietnam or palm oil effluent in Indonesia, slaughterhouse waste in Senegal, vegetable market waste that we're doing in India, Peru, in Lima, rice husk in Senegal, and also in both Rwanda and Senegal, we are also showcasing the use of rice husk for building materials. And this year, GGGI is planning to embark on a new bio-CNG program in Asia that is, it's a key strategy for many countries, and the risk appetite is perhaps just right at this moment in time. As you can see from some of the examples I've shown, emerging economies and developing countries are trying to do bio-based or biomass-based renewable energy production, but it's too often done at a small scale. And it's also too often only addressing particular types of feedstocks and organic waste one sector at a time. So the actions are indeed fragmented across actors and regions, and investments do remain risky still. The value chains are still under development and need to become fully sustainable, producing zero waste, respecting the cascading principles, and also not using what could be food crops for renewable energy. However, to show the model's efficiency and economic viability at a large scale, these countries that we work with could really benefit from knowledge transfer based on the industrial research and renewable resources potential found in the EU. To conclude my presentation, can modern bioeconomy strengthen the Paris Accord and energy security? Possibly, but the answer is not obvious. Even with all the proposed solutions to date, progress so far is not sufficient to limit climate change to the necessary 2 degrees. The current best bets, as we see it, is certainly reforestation, avoid deforestation, and reduce food waste, healthy plant-based diets, climate-smart agriculture, etc. On bioenergy, we see that it's certainly locally attractive, but limited to available biomass. On biofuels, if they themselves are sustainable, they can be really interesting for sustainable transport. But altogether, we do find that increased focus on bioeconomy policy and research is urgently needed to address sustainability issues, climate change, energy security, also to address the related health concerns, etc., as well as access to clean energy. So to end my presentation and appeal to you all in the bio-based industry in Europe and elsewhere is that you can do a lot to help, and GGGI is ready to collaborate. So thank you very much. I would like to resume my role as a moderator and also, let's say, continue this session, the first session of the conference, and the session on how to create sustainability in the bioeconomy sector. And for this, we have secured a very interesting speaker from the European Commission that can give a good perspective on how the European Commission sees this. And for that, we have Kerstin Jorna, the Director General for Internal Markets, Industry, Entrepreneurship, and SMEs. Mrs. Jorna has worked a lot, many years in the European Commission, and she has also held positions on the board of both the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund. And it is my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Jorna, and I would like to leave the floor to you, Kerstin. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Susan, also for a very fascinating presentation. I was involved in World Economic work at a certain stage, World Economic Forum work, and I find it fantastic how it has grown. Now, my role, I have my little handbag version here of the European flag because we're currently in provisional offices. My role will be to zoom in on Europe. And new industries. And first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me. This is the 13th edition of your conference, and it has proven to be a very successful forum, in particular for the large number of SMEs that are also in your organization, and I want to pay tribute to that. Now, I will start with where we stand plus our ideas how to move forward. I will look at actually, can it work the way we are thinking it? Because some people are, having their doubts. And then I will zoom in on what it means for the bioeconomy in Europe. Now, where do we stand? Europe has been through a rough patch, no doubt. And for this year, we see negative growth to the tune of 8.3%. That's the bad news. But the good news is that we see potential to go back to 6% growth next year. So it's pretty much still a V-shaped recovery. Of course, it won't happen by itself. And in that sense, Europe has taken very unprecedented steps to make it happen, to help our companies and our economy not only to bounce back, but actually to bounce forward. And there was an agreement to have 750 billion investment support package, which we would borrow on the market and which will be available in grants and loans to our member states in order to finance this recovery. Now, the challenge of this is not so much to spend that money. The challenge is to invest it in a good way, and to invest it in a way that we have a job-rich recovery. In particular, a number of SMEs in a number of sectors are struggling despite the liquidity aid that we've been giving, because if you want to invest, you need your capital base also to be correct, and currently equity is eroding, and that means no easy access for future finance. So we want to invest it in job-rich, green, and digital, and to improve the resilience of our economy. Member states have been asked to submit recovery plans by next spring, and these recovery plans will be very decisive on how the economy bounces back. These recovery plans will be based on, so they will have a share of the money that comes from the 750 billion, and the recovery plans will have to target at least 37% of climate and at least 20% of digital. And that's important to know for the project. So we must build back there. And now the question is, where do you come in all of this? We see the recovery as a key opportunity to modernize our traditional industry models and to invest in green and digital transition. We presented an industry strategy in March, which still is very much the foundation of this transformation that we are thinking at. And it's also a key tool to deliver on this work, or can this work? I'd like you to imagine for a second a bike. Now, what we believe is that the two wheels of the bike are the green transition and the digital transition. The frame that links these two wheels is fairness and inclusion. We cannot leave anybody behind, but we also need to be fair to those who have to go through this transition today, a mine worker, a coal mine worker somewhere in Europe, but for example, but also we need to be fair to the future generation, because it's the money we're borrowing from the next generation, as our instrument is also called. And we have to make sure that the decisions and the solutions we provide today will actually improve the situation for the next generation. Now, who is the bike is powered by investment. I already mentioned public investment, but I also want to mention private investment, because a recent survey run by HSBC in Europe shows that 96% of investors actually regard environmental and social issues as important. Moreover, 76 96% of investors have a firm-wide policy on responsible investing. We're supporting this with a tool called the taxonomy, by which we classify in a neutral and objective way activities, not companies, activities, to see whether they reply with these social and environmental criteria, and that's the novelty of our standard, that they also do not harm to another aspect. My example on this is always in my little village where I spend the summer, they were no longer allowed to use pesticides, but in order to do something about the bad weeds, they used an enormous machine to burn the bad weeds, which creates another problem. So the do no harm principle, ? Taxonomy has emerged as a gold standard, a European gold standard for investors, and is proving its attractiveness for also for private investors. Now, that was about powering the bike. Who is riding the bike? That's you. That's the companies. That's the industry that can propose us solutions to actually get that green and digital transition forward. And you are pedaling the two pedals, which is innovation, and that's why your industries, the bioeconomy, is really at the forefront and at the frontier, and growth also. Because, Susan, as you underlined several times in your intervention, it has to be a business case. So we need to make it a business case. I have not spoken about the light attached to the bike. The light is the regulatory framework and the strategies, the public commitment. We've come out with the industrial strategy. I also mentioned the circular economy plan, the Green Deal overall, our data strategies, and so that provides the light towards where we go. We're going to climate neutral and hyper-connected society. That's the kind of direction we are going. And when it comes to investment, there is now quite clear, strong commitment of the pathway we are following. The Commission presented the draft climate law, which will have to be approved by the legislator, which will entail a number of other changes in legal basis. So the regulatory environment and the direction, they are very clear. And that's also important for you as companies and for investors. Finally, there are some brakes on the bike, and these are for me, when you action the brakes, that's fragmentation, that's member states making their own solutions, their own keeping the borders up or creating barriers, and we want to address that also in a very strong way. And if you look at the conclusions of the heads of state last Friday, you will see that there's a very strong commitment to remove all these barriers that are still around and that do not help investment in this twin transition. Now, so that's the bike and the broader vision that we have. Now, what it means for the bioeconomy. As I said already, you are very strongly represented in the pedal, the innovation pedal, and you have very strong track records in innovating yourself into new business models. Today, you account, according to our numbers here, you account to 18 million jobs and 2.3 trillion turnover. That's not a small industry. I mean, the market is there. We are also conducting currently a study on the bio-based markets through the Joint Research Center. And this study, or the preliminary results, already show that we have a leading, thanks to you, position in the global market for bio-based products. We estimate a market share of 30% for bio-based chemicals compared to 15% for fossil-based chemicals. And for bio-based plastics, Europe has a share of 35% compared to 25% for fossil-based plastics. So you are already pedaling very strongly into the right direction here. The Commission's Knowledge Center for Bioeconomy is conducting a foresight exercise, another work strand, to explore how the EU bioeconomy can best contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals and to the transition towards the climate neutral economy by 2050. And together we are implementing the Bioeconomy Strategy Action Plan, and we will deliver a progress report in 2021. And the discussion in your conference, my colleagues are also connected, will be very relevant for that progress report. A word still on the forest industry. Susan, you have been very clear. This is a key to success in the green transformation. Forest-based industries are also a very strong part of the European economy. They represent 2.5 million workers and a considerable turnover. Again, we need you on board, and we need that industry to work as well. Now, that's how you are, who you are. How can you give us the solutions that we need, and how can we support you? And I mean, it's the solutions you've been showing to us already is biofuels, is construction materials, is forest-based industries in general. And now the question is, how can we make these solutions work, and how can we get more of them? It's no different from any other industry. You need ideas, you need investment, you need a market to make it a business model, so demand. And when it comes to ideas, I'm very confident that we can rely very much on you and your creativity. When it comes to investment, I already mentioned the important public investment that will be available. The question is how to get to it, and that's a plea I would send to all of you. Be in discussion with your member states when they draw up the recovery plans. Pitch your solutions, pitch your projects to member states. Member states will have 3 years to actually commit the money, and 6 years and another 3 years to pay it out. So what they need is really pretty much developed projects already. Of course, we will stand by your side when it comes to European research and development. There are quite considerable demands being, sums being already planned, and we will accompany this. But it's important that you also make these presentations to your respective governments. This being said, I mentioned already the single market. We want to be there with the single market to help you roll out and create that market for your products. We have the renovation wave also coming out, which will require a whole lot of new solutions when it comes to the building sector, and I think your industries are very well placed to work here. There is a follow-up on the textiles, which will be all around the recycling targets and what to do with the collection. You know, as of 2025, we have to collect. There's an obligation to collect textiles, but how to use that for the future. This is a broad way, things where we still need solutions. We have all your work, in particular through the forest-based industries, on nanocellulose. Also there, we will, linked to our plastic strategy, we will need to work together. So I think the toolbox is there. Your ideas, your projects are there, and we need you to imagine many more. And we need you in a contact, and this conference is really a very good opportunity to do this together, to imagine this together, and to roll this out together. You will have seen the Industrial Alliance on raw materials, the Industrial Alliance on hydrogen. We're really trying to power with all the tools we have at European level, from the single market, from the investment, to help you roll these solutions out. And I'm very confident that with your help, we will get a long way on our bike towards climate neutral and hyper-connected society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jorna. Very interesting. Also good to see the European Commission being very active in developing a taxonomy, looking at the regulatory environment, etc., which is really important for the sector. I wonder if you could give us some concrete examples from DG Grow's perspective of how industry, including recovery in the EU.
Yes, I can base myself on work that's already going, powered by our Horizon 2020 budgets. So we have the GLOPAC Horizon 2020 project, which is home compostable biodegradable food packaging derived from agri-food residues. We have AgriChemWay BBBIGO project. I'm sorry, this is the name of the project, but it's new high-value bio-based products from food processing, byproducts, for example, in the dairy industry. And we have First to Run BBI project, a joint undertaking project, which is high-value added bio-based products, energy, feed, and chemicals from low-input crops grown on marginal lands in Italy. I can also mention some other, which one I found personally very intriguing, Barbara, 3D printing bioplastics with food waste. The project converts extracts of lemon rinds, almond husks, and corn byproducts into sustainably sourced car parts and building components, replacing fossil-based plastics, protect the environment, and growing the circular economy. I want to show you this. This is my mug. These are the 14 industrial ecosystems in Europe, which range from tourism, proximity and social economy, digital health, agri-food, and so on. And we're really looking at these ecosystems and how solutions can work actually across ecosystems. Hydrogen being one of the examples. You need that in a couple of them here. And the work on the bioeconomy solutions, per definition, they are also very transversal. So that's our real interest in kind of continuing to work together.
Thank you. And it's also good to see that the industrial ecosystems is strong in Europe and that you're underpinning that development from the European Commission side. I wonder, the new industrial strategy refers to key enabling technologies, including biotechnology, as being strategically important for Europe's industrial future. So how do you and DG Grow see the role of innovative technologies in meeting the industrial policy goals of the EU?
Mm-hmm. So what we're doing with the ecosystem approach, is that we're looking at the interaction in these different ecosystems between, from idea and conception to rollout on the market, from the interaction between big companies, small companies, upstream, downstream, the knowledge transfer. And if you want, it's like, it's like a film. It's not a photo. In the past, we had photos of sectors, but now we're actually looking at the film. And when it comes to the film, what we're doing at the moment, we're looking at the 14, and we're identifying investment needs, repair needs, investment needs, and possible solutions. And when we then we have, it's like a matrix. On the other side, we have the tools that we have. The solutions that already exist, the regulatory part, the different sources of financing, including private financing, the broader research, innovation agenda. What can we pick from that? And we try to kind of map it into the ecosystem immediately, and that's also the key. It's the point for the key enabling technologies, to make it concrete on the ground, because we cannot wait for another 20 years to start with a recovery. We have to start now, and the money, we are going to the markets now. Actually, the commission president, in her State of the Union speech, she also said that, you know, part of it would be taken as green bonds, which is another innovation in itself. There are only a couple of countries actually experimenting with green bonds or issuing. It would mean a major impact if these 750 billion and the EU were issuing green bonds, or at least part of this. So this, again, incentivizes people to think about green solutions, because it's not to spend the money like any other money, it's to spend it to invest it in a green and digital way. So that's where the work on the ecosystems is so important, because we constantly link back to the reality of these 14 when we look at the different tools we have. Maybe in the past, we were looking too much at the industry, but not looking at the tools at the same time. And by bringing it all together, we think we can be more efficient and faster, because we have no choice. We have to be fast now. We have to save and create the jobs for the future.
Thank you very much, from your perspective. I think this was really interesting, and in the interest of time, I think we would like to thank Kerstin Jorna for her contribution, and best of luck with your plans. Thank you
Same
so
to
much.
you. Thank you.
Bye. I would like to, let's say, introduce our next speaker. It's something I really looked forward to in my previous job working for Europe's largest public-private partnership addressing climate change. I had the pleasure of working with Forum for the Future on alternative proteins and other matters. So I'm really pleased to introduce Dr. Sally Uren, the Chief Executive of the Forum of the Future, a really interesting organization working with global organizations to address complex challenges. And Sally is not only the CEO, but also independent advisor for many global businesses, such as Kimberly-Clark, Johnson & Johnson, etc. So Sally, please, the floor is yours. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanne. Very happy to be here today. What I wanted to do today was to take a look at what are the pathways to sustainability that are unfolding as we emerge and in some ways continue to navigate this COVID crisis. So I'm really trying to take a look at what that might all mean for the bioeconomy as we go forward. So I'm just going to see if I can, yes, here we go. Can use the technology. Thank you also, Susanne, for that introduction. Really nice introduction of Forum. We are a sustainable development non-profit. We're present in 4 geographies, here in the UK, in New York, Singapore, and in Mumbai. And we try and address critical global challenges by really focusing on understanding them as systemic challenges, and in so doing trying to catalyze progress towards sustainable development. And we do that through working in partnership. So we work with a whole range of organizations, developing ambitious strategies, but also in collaborations. And we run a number of collaborations, one of them, as Susanne just highlighted, looking at how do we accelerate access to sustainable protein. So that's Forum in a nutshell. What I wanted to do was just to share with you some emerging work that we're actually publishing next week. So this is a sneak peek of a project that we undertake on an annual basis called The Future of Sustainability. So each year we try and scan what's happening in the world around us, understand where the future might be headed as a way of making better decisions today. And this year's report was due to be launched in May, but of course we knew what happened earlier on in the year. There we go. We didn't publish the report in May because events were somewhat overtaken by COVID. And we obviously have seen COVID-19 as the first shock of this decade. In last year's Futurist Sustainability Report, we talked about the 2020s being the turbulent decade. I don't think even we at Forum could have anticipated that this global pandemic would hit so soon and so hard. And it has literally disrupted everything. So whilst that feels really disorientating, has introduced huge uncertainty into all of our lives, because it has affected absolutely everything, comes a moment to actually rethink the systems, the structures, the processes around us. What is fascinating about COVID is that it hasn't just influenced how data is sharing, how organizations are forming, it's influenced our very mindsets. And so it is a deep, deep moment of systems transformation affecting everything. But because that is the reality in which we find ourselves, there becomes an opportunity to really understand how do we, in some ways, seize this moment and not just build back better, but actually build back very, very differently. And I really like this quote from Christiana Figueres, because for me, it highlights the critical importance of this moment in time. So we started the 2020s talking about this being the decade of delivery, highlighting that the choices, the decisions we made over the next decade were really going to be pivotal for how we deal with the climate emergency, the biodiversity emergency, and were critical for delivering stability over the next few decades. I actually would completely agree with Christiana in that I think actually what we do over the next 6 to 18 months will define not just the next decade, but the next century, because literally everything is moving around us. So how do we make sense of this moment of discontinuity? One of the ways in which we try and understand how the future might be unfolding at Forum is to create scenarios. Actually, because we're facing so much uncertainty at this point in time, what we've been doing over the last few months is really building out a number of different trajectories. So different possible plausible pathways going from this moment of major discontinuity. And what I'd like to do today is to share with you these 4 trajectories, highlight some of the implications for the bioeconomy as a way of understanding how might the bioeconomy respond to this moment in time and really unlock the huge potential that we've just been hearing about from the previous 2 speakers in really mainstreaming the bioeconomy. So 4 trajectories, I'm going to go through them all in turn. First, disciplined. This is a trajectory where we see continued ramping up use of technology, a massive increase in surveillance, and a return to some form of globalization. This is a return to the economic model that we see today. And for each of the trajectories, we have highlighted the mindset that prevails in that trajectory. And that's really important because systemic transformation really only finds its way forward if we actually alter our belief system, the way we look at the world. All of us will have examples of change initiatives that we've tried to push ahead with and find that they stall because actually it's the beliefs and value sets that really need to shift. And understanding the different mindsets in the world around us is a way of driving really serious change towards sustainable development. And so the mindset in discipline is that actually public health outcomes come first, and that greater control is required to maintain our public health and safety. And we will do what we can to keep the current economic model running. And so we'll go back to where we were before. The sort of things that might happen in this trajectory is actually not the things we've just been hearing about in the previous speaker's intervention. This is an inflexible economy that's still layered with debt, that actually hasn't broadened out its objectives to include the creation of environmental and social value, and is the economy that still has those structural inequalities that mean that actually it's very hard to see some of the solutions for sustainable development begin to mainstream. We're also likely to see in this trajectory rapid automation of global supply chains with really significant negative social impacts. So just transition is closed off in this trajectory because it's so tech enabled and we're running the current economic paradigm. But on the light side, efficiency goals in this trajectory mean that actually the circular economy does mainstream, because that makes complete sense. And we also see tech-enabled transparency really giving us line of sight of goods and services. And actually, this is a trajectory that works well for some aspects of the bioeconomy, because we see alternatives to raw material mainstream, because actually that really takes advantage of the tech that we have available. And another positive of this trajectory is that we see far more use of global sensor networks, so really harnessing that technology to allow us to keep an eye on the forests around the world and to ensure that we're really rapidly responding to things like illegal logging. So that's disciplined. Number 2, compete and retreat. And I should say that with all 4 trajectories, we're seeing all 4 play out almost on a daily basis. So you can live a day in our lives right now and actually experience all 4 of these trajectories simultaneously. Compete and retreat. This is the continuous strengthening of nationalist dynamics. It is, unfortunately, the collapse of what's left of globalization. It is in some ways, the end of multilateralism. You do see international cooperation, but it's very bilateral in its configuration, because what we see is fragmented regionalization. The mindset that prevails in this trajectory, there just isn't enough to share, and we must protect our own, and we'll only cooperate if we get something back. So what kind of things might be happening in this trajectory? Well, attempts at international collaboration, particularly around issues around climate, just don't really work, because actually there's no appetite for international cooperation in this trajectory. The world then begins to regionalize pretty chaotically. Global supply chains will shorten, will be really influenced by where they straddle in terms of their geographic origins. Focus is on national health, food and energy security, and where there are natural resources, there's a pressure to exploit them, because actually the global supply chains that we're used to don't really work in this trajectory. It's pretty dark, but at a global level, there are some positives. Strong sense of national unity, reshoring happens in this trajectory, so some economic boost at a local level. Again, circular manufacturing becomes visible in this trajectory, and renewables get a boost because renewables make complete sense in this trajectory. So that's compete and retreat. Number 3 is unsettled, and this is a trajectory which is really a continuation of where we've been. Continuous discontinuity, a crisis within a crisis. Think about the Lebanon massive explosion, really terrible loss of life, prompts a crisis in government, prompts civil unrest. So there is no new normal. We are just lurching from one crisis to another in this trajectory. The mindset is there is no normal, and the previous logic doesn't really work in this trajectory. And this is all about resilience, adaptability, and emergence. So the kinds of things that we might see in this trajectory are crises within crises. Biosphere tipping points could create really, really difficult nonlinear impacts. And the institutions that we all belong to, we don't know really how to respond to this world. And so in this trajectory, flexibility, opportunism are rewarded with a huge focus on resilience and adaptability. Quite a difficult trajectory for sustainable development. Then number 4 and final is, I believe, the trajectory we need to pay the most attention to. This trajectory is consistent with what's happening in the European Union right now. And this is a trajectory where we actually take the opportunity to reset better and to once and for all deal with the limitations to our current economy, deal with structural inequality, and approaches like stakeholder capitalism begin to mainstream. And we see the emergence of new business models focused on regeneration and on resilience. And the mindset in this trajectory is planetary health is human health. Our fates as humans are deeply interconnected with the fate of the planet. And actually, we can't have economic health without a healthy planet and healthy humans. So deep change is possible, it's desirable in this trajectory, and we mustn't go back to where we were before. And so the kinds of things that might happen in this trajectory, We deal with inequality once and for all. We see international cooperation really dealing with those barriers that have been there to sustainable development. We see an acceleration towards zero carbon economies. We see the just transition becoming a reality. Decentralized distributed responses from communities become the norm. And we see business, government really purposely driven and driving forward a new way of operating that's consistent with sustainable development. This is a trajectory where the goals of the economy broaden to include the creation of environmental and societal value. And we see new sustainable business models emerge, and we see an increasing conversation about the need for regeneration. So some of the solutions that Susanne was showing you in the first presentation, they all mainstream. Nature-based solutions are the norm in this trajectory. And we see these economic models such as Kate Raworth's donor economic, they begin to mainstream. So going back to the quote from Christiana Figueres, what happens next has never mattered more. And what I think is really important is that at any point over the next 3, 6, 18 months from now, any of these 4 trajectories could become the dominant. They're all playing out at the moment. And so if we find ourselves in discipline, if we find ourselves in compete and retreat, understanding the mindset that operates in that trajectory, understanding what's happening in that trajectory is a really brilliant way of understanding, well, how can I move from discipline to transform? How can I move from compete and retreat to transform? So in other words, by understanding all of these trajectories and the mindsets, we can really understand that pathway to sustainable development. And so that's why we're offering this report next week to the world, because we're really hoping it will help make sense of what's happening around us and critically understand what is it that we need to do to drive forward sustainable development. And I think there are some very specific calls to action here for the bioeconomy. Just some food for thought for today. I think what we need to see are businesses adopting really ambitious strategies, which really lead the way with research and development, innovation, and marketing, making it easier for sustainable lifestyles to be the norm, and for businesses to be really strong and vocal about the enabling policy framework, such as the one emerging here in Europe around the Green New Deal. Businesses need to find their voice and be clear about that enabling policy framework that will mainstream their sustainable development goals. Governments around the world, not just in Europe, need to align post-COVID stimulus packages with the principles of sustainable development, and all procurement or public-private partnerships need to align with the goals of transform. Investors, this is the moment to divest from the industries of the past and invest in the industries of today and tomorrow, and to really understand, how do we look at new financial instruments, social bonds, green bonds, to finance the transition from a carbon economy to a no carbon positive economy. And within that, we need to broaden ESG to make sure the risks of environmental and social collapse are properly factored in. And then for those of you in the conference today that belong to network organizations, multipliers, trade bodies, how do you collaborate? How do you advocate? How do you amplify? How can we ensure that everything is joined up towards the goals of that transformed trajectory? So I would just really echo Christiana Figueres and be very clear that the decisions we all make over the next few months will determine not just the next year, not just the next decade, but the next century. And let's really respond to this major moment of discontinuity, harness all this dynamism, and use it to chart a pathway to the future that we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally, for a very interesting sort of sense making of the whole, let's say, situation we are in, and the dire future unless we all join forces for action. Maybe just a quick, let's say, question. What do you think that that the companies and the individuals in the biotechnology industry, what can they do in the next 6 months? You mentioned some calls for action, but do you have any sort of concrete advice? What can we do tomorrow?
I think for the bioeconomy, there is an unparalleled moment at this point in time to really mainstream a lot of what's been going on in the past, and possibly to take a bit more risk, to be a little bit more ambitious, to really access new and different forms of capital, to ensure that the solutions that are there already, and you covered a lot of them, Susanne, they're already there, they need to scale. And I think that for the bioeconomy, now is the time to find your muscle and to really understand, the investment is there. It's just tied up in different forms and different instruments. And we can see through things like green bonds, social bonds, there are investment mechanisms that allow that rapid deployment of capital to scale these new innovations. So if I were running a bioeconomy business today, I'd be looking at how can I really accelerate access to finance to scale my solutions, and how can I really work with the rest of the industry to understand those points of collaboration that might not be working so well at the moment to get that additionality. And thirdly, be very clear what I need from government and what I need from public policy frameworks to enable that scaling. Now is the moment, it really is.
Okay, thank you so much, Sally. I think we do need to break for the next session. You will note from the chat that we have a panel where, from an industry perspective, we have some interesting speakers from some prominent companies and investors in this sector. And also Sally will be joining us for the next session. So we will take a short break, and in the web link that you see on the chat, then you can access the next panel in 10 minutes at 11 o'clock. We will start, and we will cover hopefully a lot of interesting points as well. So I would like to thank Sally and Kerstin, all the speakers and the audience for this session, and hope to see you in 8 minutes to be exact. Thank you very much.